Hey, happy Friday, and welcome to the 200th episode of the Friday Checkout. That is such a crazy high number. It means that we spent basically 4 years together, just you and I, and like Microsoft and Apple and all of our other bros. It's a very nice family. Anyway, this week Samsung's grip on the foldable smartphone market just completely slipped. ARM somehow became a direct competitor to Qualcomm, and Google accidentally leaked 2,500 of its own internal documents. Welcome to the Friday Checkout. This video was sponsored by Ground News. Okay, we start the brief with 3 pieces of Apple news. First, WWDC is scheduled for the 10th of June, which likely means a new iOS and a macOS version. And if you're wondering, Swift is the name of Apple's own programming language, and rumors are that we will also see a new and upgraded Apple TV at the event. Second, an Apple TV Plus app looks to be finally coming to Android smartphones, with Apple currently hiring Android software engineers. Nice. And third, Apple officially signed its deal with OpenAI to improve things like Siri, which got Microsoft really worried. Satya Nadella and Sam Altman have recently met to discuss how Apple's use might affect Microsoft's servers when their demand ramps up. Plus, Microsoft might also be worried about how Apple's AI capabilities will compete directly with Microsoft's. We keep getting signs of the OpenAI and Microsoft partnership being a little bit shaky, so this could be big. Anyway, talking of Microsoft, the company has also released Auto Super Resolution for Windows 11, which promises to increase frame rates by AI technology, and it seems to be a chip vendor independent version of technologies like Nvidia's DLSS, AMD's FSR, or Intel's XeSS. Kinda cool if it works. And meanwhile, still in AI land, Elon Musk's xAI has raised an incredible $6 billion this week, giving the company a pre-money valuation of $18 billion. Investors include Silicon Valley heavyweights like Sequoia and Andreessen Horowitz, and also, for example, someone from the Saudi royal family for good measure. Oh boy. Moving on to good news, the Affinity Suite, which is my graphics editor of choice, was updated to run natively on Windows on ARM a few days ago. Every day I'm getting closer to buying one of those ARM-based Surface devices again. And finally, for the brief, the FBI and others have found that these free VPN tools were used to create the world's biggest botnet, which they have now shut down. If you're running either of these, the FBI document is linked in the description. As for new releases, Framework announced its new 2024 Laptop 13 using the new Intel Core Ultra chips, a new screen, a new webcam, better thermals, full-sized SD card modules, and more. And what's also really cool is that Framework is offering the display and the webcam as drop-in options for older models. Sadly, there's no news on Snapdragon chips or the newly announced LP Cam RAM, but maybe next time. Also this week, Nothing launched the phone to a special edition with a really cool new color scheme. Google announced the $230 Fitbit Ace LTE, which is basically a Pixel Watch 2 for kids. And finally, the makers of Halide, or Halide I guess, announced a pro video app for iPhones called Kino. The app has tons of pro features and people really seem to like it, with the app having shot up to the top of the paid App Store list. Nice. Okay, for my first story of the week, the foldable smartphone market went through the most crazy transformation, with Samsung coming out as the clear loser. Counterpoint data showed this week that Samsung lost its extremely dominant first place position and fell to the second position for the first time ever last quarter. And that is because the company actually saw an incomprehensible 42% decline in sales, while the market overall grew 49%. Everyone else in the top 5 had massive gains, but the clear winner is Huawei, which took the top spot with a 35% market share despite only really selling in China and in the Middle East. Of course, China is the biggest market for foldables by far, but still being the global #1 like this is wild. Honor was also extremely impressive with a 460% growth, and Counterpoint says that their Magic V2 phone became the most shipped foldable in all of Western Europe for the quarter. So that means Honor actually beat Samsung in one of its strongest markets. And meanwhile, Motorola's growth is even more bonkers at over 1,400%, and Counterpoint says that their Razr 40 became a top model in North America. Now, quarterly sales figures are often misleading because maybe a brand brings out a model a few months earlier, 1 year, and then a few months later next year, and that completely changes the short-term picture. But the fact that the Moto Razr 40, which came out at the same time as Samsung's foldable, is still doing so well while Samsung is struggling, I think that says a ton. Even as a user of Samsung's foldables, I think their innovation has just been way too slow, and I really hope they pick up the pace. The next set of Samsung foldables is rumored to launch on the 10th of July, and leaks suggest that the Fold 6 will be boxier with a thinner hinge and a wider outer display, while the Flip will be a bit thicker to house a bigger battery. There have also been quite a few rumors that Samsung will have a slimmer version of the Fold without an S Pen, but I guess that is still some time away. Okay, for my second story of the week, you know how ARM is this company whose technologies other chip companies like Qualcomm, for example, built their chips on top of? Well, it turns out that these two companies are increasingly becoming rivals. Let me explain. On the one hand, ARM has announced its new CPU and GPU designs this week, and as you would expect, these bring all the usual improvements. The new GPU blueprints, for example, come with 52% better ray tracing, while on the CPU front we see a very respectable 36% performance improvement on the big cores and 35% performance efficiency gains on the medium ones, which is a term that I've never heard before, but I guess it's a combination of performance and efficiency. Now, these numbers seem a little bit bigger than usual, and that is because ARM this year has actually worked with manufacturers like TSMC and Samsung, and has already included the performance gains from jumping to the next manufacturing node into these claims as well, jumping to 3 nanometers that is. But yeah, the interesting bit is that ARM has told the analysts that this new CPU would likely outperform all mobile phone cores, including custom, which is nuts. Okay, just a little explainer here. So most normal chip companies like MediaTek, for example, or Samsung, they take these ARM CPU cores, for example, and they just build their own CPU with these designs. But some companies like Apple, for example, they actually design their own ARM cores. And ARM here is saying that their default design will actually beat the custom ones. And I think that is directly aimed at Qualcomm because for the first time since 2017, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 4 will also ship with custom CPU cores called Orion instead of the standard ARM ones. These are the same cores that Qualcomm has first put into its new X Plus and X Elite laptop chips, and they're now coming to mobile. So that's the basics. There's going to be a head-to-head competition, but there's actually more. ARM specifically calls out the best-in-class performance for PCs multiple times in their documents, which further fuels rumors that MediaTek, Nvidia, and others will launch competing ARM-based chips for Windows potentially as soon as next year to take on Qualcomm. And if that wasn't enough, ARM has also sued Qualcomm and the company Nuvia that they bought for those custom Orion cores for license violations, so things are getting pretty spicy. These used to be really good partners, and instead they're now direct competitors who are in a lawsuit. Okay, and for my third story of the week, Google had a massive leak revealing how their search engine works, including some inconvenient truths. Someone from Google accidentally published 2,500 leaked internal documents to GitHub, and after much silence after the incident, Google finally confirmed that the documents were actually real. Oops, mom, I went to work today and I accidentally leaked 2,500 really valuable internal documents. Don't worry, Johnny, I bet it will be fine. Of course, people started going through the documents and they have very quickly found strong indications that Google wasn't exactly honest about how Google search works. For example, Google has repeatedly said that it does not use data it collected from Google Chrome as part of its organic search, but the document indicated that Chrome-related measurement attributes are used, and Google may get insights by tracking billions of Chrome users' click streams. Or another example is evidence of a click and impression signal system, which tried to establish how long you visited a site after you clicked and if you clicked back. Google people have previously said that they didn't use such a system because using clicks directly in ranking would be a mistake. Now, people are still going through the document, and I generally find search mechanics somewhat boring, to be honest, but the point to take away here is that if Google says they have data but they're not using it for their own products, well, I'll be skeptical about that. Now, a lot more has happened this week, both in tech and beyond, and if you want to try a new and more informed way to consume your news, then give Ground News a try. Ground News is a website and an app that aggregates and contextualizes news across politics, business, tech, and more in a really helpful way. Every story comes with a quick visual breakdown of the political bias, factuality, and ownership of the source's reporting, all backed by ratings from 3 independent news monitoring organizations. So for example, here's recent news that T-Mobile is acquiring most of US Cellular in a $4.4 billion deal. I can see that over 90 sources are covering it. The coverage is slightly more left biased. I can see how factual the news outlets are and who they are owned by. And one thing I particularly like is this map that shows who first broke the story, in this case Forbes, and then also where in the world the coverage is actually coming from. That is super helpful for learning how narratives get shaped. And you can then go and click through the actual articles and pick the one that you want to read with quick labels. Like, fun fact, I learned that Time magazine was owned by Mark Benioff, who is the founder of Salesforce, so I might or might not want to have news from him, and I can definitely avoid outlets like OAN here, which has a clear low factuality rating. No thank you. Ground News has a dedicated blind spot section that shows you news stories that were mostly covered by one side of the political spectrum, and you can of course customize your feed to see more news from a region or a topic that you care about. To get smarter about the news, go to ground.news/Friday checkout or click on the link in the description, and don't forget to try a premium subscription for the full picture. You can get 40% off with my link, so be sure to use that, and I'll see you next Friday.